questions for you guys. Has God ever told you to do something or not do something that either your friends, your family, your spouse, your significant other, the culture, or even your own church family have tried to talk you out of? Or have you ever struggled to stand your ground in God's request for you despite the noise in your ear to do something different than what He's told you to do? In my message today, I want you to think on this question, and it's a personal question that everyone needs to think of for themselves. What do you do when God's mission for you is unapproved by those closest to you? Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to share this message. And I ask that you allow me to step back so you can speak through me. And allow what is presented tonight to change our thoughts and our minds about you and what you've called us to do individually, that we may leave here different from when we came. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. So I'm going to read the focus verse again, but I'm going to read it from the easy version. And yes, that's a real version in the Bible app. You can look it up yourself. I did make it up. I didn't.
So the easy version?
The easy version, yeah.
And I said that once and y'all laughed at me.
No, I love it. It's great. I love it. So, 1 Peter 3:13-17. If you always try to do good things, then nobody should hurt you. But somebody might give you trouble, even when you do what is right. If that happens, God will bless you. So, do not be afraid of what people may do to you. Do not worry about it. Instead, always remember that Christ is your Lord. Let Him lead how you live. People may ask you, why do you trust God to help you? You must always be ready to answer them about that. But when you tell them, be kind and polite. Do only what you know is right, and then those people will see that you live in a good way because you believe in Christ. And when they say bad things against you, they will become ashamed. Sometimes God may let you have trouble and pain even when you have done good things. But that is better than if you have trouble and pain because you have done bad things. So I'm going to show 3 examples of people who were called to do or not do something, whether it was a solo mission or a joint mission, and how either culture, friends, or family affected their choice. And I'll start with Aaron, Moses' older brother, and in Exodus 28. So at this point in their story, they'd already crossed the Red Sea with the Israelites, and they brought them out of bondage from the Egyptians. And they were well on their way to the Promised Land when God gave Moses an instruction for Aaron. Now I'm going to read from the easy-to-read version. Keeping it easy, guys. Okay, so Exodus 28, verse 1. Tell your brother Aaron and his sons, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar, to come to you from the Israelites. These men will serve me as priests. Make special clothes for your brother Aaron. These clothes will give him honor and respect. Aaron's mission was to be a priest for the people of Israel. Chapters later, Moses had gone up to Mount Sinai, had a pretty cool encounter with the Lord up there, but he'd been gone for too long, and so the people were getting a little antsy. So if we go down to chapter 32, verse 1, you'll see what happened. The people saw that a long time had passed and Moses had not come down from the mountain, so they gathered around Aaron and they said to him, look, Moses led us out of the land of Egypt, but we don't know what has happened to him. So make us some gods to go before us and lead us. Now, Aaron had a choice at this moment. He knew his calling. He knew he was called to be a priest. But now the people are asking him to do something that goes very against his calling, to create a God for them when he knows the God that they're to serve. Let's see what Aaron decides to do. Aaron said to the people, bring me the gold earrings that belong to your wives, sons, and daughters. So the people collected all their gold earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took the gold from the people and used it to make an idol. Using a special tool, he shaped the gold into a statue of a calf. Then the people said, "Israel, here are your gods. These are the gods that brought you out of the land of Egypt." Now, Moses was gone for a long time, but he did come back. And when he did, he became very angry when he saw the people of Israel. They were dancing, they were worshiping this golden calf. He was so angry that he broke the tablets, melted down the calf, threw the gold in the water, and then told the people to drink it. And then he confronted his brother Aaron. If you go down to verse 21, Moses said to Aaron, "What did these people do to you that would make you do this? Why did you lead them to do such a terrible sin?" Aaron answered, "Don't be angry, sir. You know that these people are always ready to do wrong. The people said to me, 'Moses led us out of Egypt, but we don't know what happened to him. So make us gods and lead us.' So I told the people, 'If you have any gold rings, then give them to me.' The people gave me their gold. I threw the gold into the fire, and out of the fire came this calf, like it was a miraculous thing that just appeared out of the sky or something." Moses saw that Aaron had let the people get out of control. They were being wild, and all their enemies could see them acting like fools. So we can easily see that Aaron allowed for his fear of the culture, the people literally surrounding him, to be greater than his fear of God. And he aborted his mission as priest and spiritual leader for the group by disobeying God. And it made Moses angry because not only were they hurting themselves, but they were hurting the image of God for those around them getting to see who God's people were. But Aaron wasn't the only person who aborted ship from his mission from God. Let's look at King David's son Amnon. King David, who was the little boy who had killed Goliath with a pebble and a sling, when he became king, he was the king, and he came from the tribe of Judah. There's Israelites from the tribe of Judah. He became king and he had kids. His oldest son was Amnon, and he had a daughter, Tamar, who was Amnon's half-sister. And years prior to this, God had given the Israelites instruction for being sexually pure. You can see that in Leviticus 18, where he tells them, "You should never have sexual relations with your close relatives. I am the Lord." And then he even has to clarify and say, "Don't have sexual relations with your sister." It doesn't matter if she's the daughter of your father, daughter of your mother, if she was born in another house or anywhere else. Don't do this. And he gave them there was even more instruction later on in Deuteronomy about rape culture and what to do if a woman who's engaged becomes raped, or if a virgin becomes raped, and what they need to do when those situations happen. So it sounds to me like God knew about the Me Too movement before we put a name on it. And he wanted his people to be held accountable for their sexual sins against God. Not because it was offensive to God only, but they represented God to the surrounding communities and countries as well. They were set apart to be different, to set the standard of living. It was a culture-wide mission, if you will. So if we go to 2 Samuel 13, we see David's nephew, Amnon's first cousin, Jonadab. He was really good friends with Amnon. And we find out quickly that Amnon is in love with his sister Tamar. Not acceptable. And she was a virgin, which only made her so much more attractive to him. And he shared this dilemma with his cousin, Jonadab, who was also his really good friend. And Jonadab had a response for him. In verse 5 of chapter 13 of 2 Samuel, Jonadab said to Amnon, "Go to bed, pretend you're sick, and then your father will come to you and tell him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come in and give me food to eat. let her make the food in front of me, then I will see it and eat it from her hand. So we already have a problem. First, Jonadab had a choice when Amnon told him of his situation, being in love with his own sister. He had the choice to tell him that he had an Israeli mission to not do heinous things like that. But instead, he encouraged him and then gave him a blueprint on how to violate his half-sister. This was a blatant disapproval of God's mission in the lives of the Israelites. But then Amnon also still had a choice. He could either do as God called the Israelites to do and forego his feelings for his sister and ignore Jonadab and his plan, or he could follow the advice of his dear friend and cousin. Unfortunately, he did follow Jonadab's instruction instead of God, and he ended up violating his sister. So in verse 10, Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the bedroom and feed me by hand." So Tamar took the cakes that she had made and went to her brother's bedroom. She started to feed Amnon, but he grabbed her hand and he said to her, "Sister, come and sleep with me." Tamar said to Amnon, "No, brother, don't force me to do this. Don't do this shameful thing. Terrible things like this should never be done in Israel. I would never get rid of my shame, and people would think you're just a common criminal. Please talk to the king. He'll let you marry me." So Amnon had a second chance to either follow God or follow his feelings with his support from his friend Jonadab. But Amnon refused to listen to Tamar, and he was stronger than she was. So he did force her to have sexual relations with him. And then Amnon began to hate Tamar. He hated her more than he loved her before. And Amnon said to her, "Get up and get out of here." So we see that she pleads with him again. A third attempt to even reconcile the act of sin in a less shameful manner. And yet he had her sent out of his bedroom. His lust got to the best of him, and his friend didn't encourage him to stop, but instead gave him the plan to execute it. But because his thoughts now had support, he aborted God's mission in his life to be different. So, who did do it right? Who did follow the instruction of God and stay upon the mission? Let's look at Abraham and Sarah for a second, because they were the parents of the promise. And in Genesis 15, when Abraham was still Abram, God had promised him that he'd have a son, and that his son would be, or his family would be countless like the stars in the sky, deeming Abram faithful to the Lord and doing what was right. A call to fatherhood at his very old age. Unfortunately, both he and his wife Sarai, who later became Sarah, they had their doubts because of their age that this was even possible, yet we see God's grace in the process of his mission on their lives. We see in Genesis 16 that Sarai convinced Abram that God, for some reason, needed their help in fulfilling his promise to them. So she offered Hagar, her servant girl, to Abram as a way to have a son. She even told him that if Hagar did conceive, that she would be more than willing to accept him as her own son. Now, Abram still had a choice. He could focus on what God told him was going to happen and what his mission was to be faithful and wait for the promise. Or he could try this method, see what would happen. So he tried his wife's idea, and Hagar did become pregnant. And then Sarai had the audacity to get mad at Hagar for her own suggestion to her husband and the servant girl. Well, Hagar ended up having the son Ishmael, and Abram was 86 at the time. So you think by this time God would probably just say he's kind of over it. He's not doing this anymore. You guys aren't listening to me. I'm really tired of doing this. We're not going to fulfill the promise. But God actually ended up continuing to show these two grace, even though they kept messing up. And he returned to Abraham when he was 99 years old in chapter 17, and he gave him a second chance by instructing him. In verse 1, the Lord appeared to Abraham and he said, I am God all-powerful. Obey me and live the right way. If you do this, I will prepare an agreement between us, and I will promise to make your people a great nation. Then Abraham bowed down before God, and God said to him, this is my part of our agreement. I will make you the father of many nations. I will change your name to Abraham, from Abraham to Abraham, because I am making you the father of many nations. This mission to fatherhood came with an agreement that Abraham also had to do, and that was for all the men, including himself, to be circumcised. Then God clarified even further in verse 15 that Sarai would now be Sarah and become the mother of many nations. Abraham had a reaction to this, so let's read in verse 17. Abraham bowed his face to the ground and showed he respected God. But he laughed and said to himself, I am 100 years old. I cannot have a son, and Sarah is 90 years old. She cannot have a child. Then Abraham said to God, I hope Ishmael will live and serve you. And God said, no, I said that your wife Sarah will have a son. You will name him Isaac. I will make my agreement with him that will continue forever with all his descendants. Down to 21, I will make my agreement with Isaac, the son who Sarah will have, and he will be born at this same time next year. Now, even though Abraham laughed, he showed his trust in God of the promise by following through with the circumcisions of himself and all the men, including Ishmael. Later, the Lord and 3 men came to him in chapter 18, and Abraham invited the men to his house while Sarah was still in the tent. So in verse 10, one of the men said to Abraham, I will come again in the spring, and at that time your wife Sarah will have a son. Sarah was listening in the tent and heard these things. Abraham and Sarah were very old. Sarah was past the right age for women to have children, so she laughed to herself and said, I'm old and my husband is old. I am too old to have a baby. Then the Lord said to Abraham, Sarah laughed and said that she was too old to have a baby, but is anything too hard for the Lord? I will come again in the spring, just as I said I would, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Sarah said, I didn't laugh. She said this because she was afraid. Then the Lord said, no, I know that's not true. You did laugh. And Sarah continued to show her disapproval of the mission, even though she was also a part of it. And her husband was trying to do the will of God, but his partner in the mission was doing things to show how she truly felt. And even though Abraham had his own personal moments, he still acted in faith. He could have simply given up and told God, look, my wife is right. This all actually looks kind of ridiculous, and I think she makes more sense, so I don't think we need to do this, Lord. He could have blamed everything on her, which, similar to how Adam reacted when he chose to take the fruit from his wife and eat that too, but because Abraham in his faithfulness, though he stumbled a bit, God still blessed him, and his blessings are still pouring out upon all of us who are adopted into the faith. Imagine, though, how choosing to listen to others or choosing to follow God can affect the trajectory of the entire world in either a negative or a positive way. So, 2019, and God still calls us on missions. And some of those are big missions, and some of those are really small missions. Maybe He's called you to a career change, or you have to make a decision on where you're going for college, and you feel like God's calling you to do something, and family and friends are telling you to not do what God's really trying to tell you to do. Maybe you've been called into a life of singleness, and the sisters in the church will not stop praying for your spouse to show up. Maybe you're called to marry outside of your race and your culture, and your family's threatening to disown you if you try. Maybe you've been called to reconcile or remarry an ex-spouse, and your friends think you can do so much better. Maybe God's called you to sever a relationship or a friendship, and that very person is trying to convince you otherwise. Maybe God's called you to plant a church, take a break, talk to a stranger, pray with someone, stand firm against an authoritative figure, or even start something new and innovative. No matter what the mission is, it's so much more important to follow the will and calling of God in your life than to follow the will of man. It's not always about trying to make sense of the call, because imagine the rabbit hole that you can go down in trying to make sense of a God that doesn't work in the realm of sense. Look what happened to Abraham and Sarah. But he does work in giving us peace that surpasses our understanding in whatever it is that we are called to do for his glory. And people will give you an earful about what they think you should do when God calls you to do something. And I'm not saying guidance isn't important. It is. And advice is highly encouraged. Mentorship is very, very helpful. But sometimes it's not if you know God's telling you something that even people who deeply love you are talking you out of. And sometimes in standing in your trust in God, you might put strain on those relationships or even lose people in your life simply because you don't do what they tell you to do. That does happen. But God's instruction trumps the instruction of everyone else. In following him, in the faith of Christ, we will be blessed, we will be used to bless others, and God's name will ultimately be glorified. So my final charge to everyone is this. No matter whether you're a child, a teenager, a young adult, a seasoned adult, a baby Christian, or a mature one, my charge to you is to stay in constant communication with God. The closer you are to Christ, like you are a best friend, the easier it will be to know when he's given you his instruction, because he will give you the spirit of discernment to know. And when he does give you a mission to accomplish, don't be discouraged if your mission is unapproved by those closest to you or those around you, but instead be encouraged that God put his stamp of approval on his mission